When you hear a lie so often that you think it's the truth, we say you've been gaslighted. That is just as true for government as any other part of your life. From early in the 20th century, Congress has been telling the American people the lie that they limited the number of members in the House of Representatives by law, even though that law is invalid and void. Yet the American people sit back and allow their employees in Congress to violate the law and do so with blatant disregard for the supreme law of the land and their oath or affirmation to support it. We act like the people in the Hans Christian Andersen tale, The Emperor's New Clothes. We nod our heads and go along with what we've been told our entire lives, that the House of Representatives legally has 435 members. I'm here to play the role of the small boy in the story and cry out, "The Emperor has no clothes!" Specifically, the House of Representatives has denied you the proper representation you are entitled to in Congress, and it's about time we do something about it. So we'll discuss that next on the Constitution Study.
One thing you have to know wherever you make your stand came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here, welcoming you to the Constitution Study. This is where we read and study the Constitution. We teach the rising generation to be free. Glad you could join me. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on, so I'm going to ask you, when you get a chance, head to constitutionstudy.com, and if you would, click that newsletter button. Sign up for the newsletter. I only send one out once a month unless there's something really important going on, and you'll be alerted to all the new stuff that's going on at the Constitution Study. You can even check the box and have all of these videos delivered directly to your mailbox as soon as they come out. No worrying about YouTube or Twitter suddenly deciding they don't want to show you my content. I send it directly to you. So with that, let's talk a little bit about this gaslighting that's been going on from Congress. Let's start this tale where all good stories should start, at the beginning. Article 6, Clause 2 of the Constitution states, "This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding." The Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land. Only laws of the United States made in pursuance of or following the Constitution are considered supreme as well. Any act of Congress that is not pursuant to the Constitution is repugnant or contrary to the supreme law of the land. According to the Supreme Court of the United States, such an act of Congress is void. It is empty. It is vacant. From the Marbury versus Madison opinion. Thus, the particular phraseology of the Constitution of the United States confirms and strengthens the principle, supposed to be essential to all written constitutions, that a law repugnant to the Constitution is void, and that courts, as well as other departments, are bound by that instrument. This idea that the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land is the bedrock to the rule of law, the concept of self-governance, and our constitutional republic. So when those in government violate the Constitution, they are not merely acting unconstitutionally. They are violating the law, exercising unjust powers, and stealing from the American people their ability to consent to the actions of their government. Which brings me to the Apportionment Acts that Congress has passed. Section 2 of the 14th Amendment reads, "Representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each state, excluding Indians not taxed." Now, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the Constitution was amended by the 14th Amendment to remove the 3/5 clause, which limited the counting of non-free persons for the purposes of apportionment. The reason the federal government conducts a census every 10 years is because it's required by Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the Constitution. To understand this apportionment of representatives, we have to understand why we have a bicameral national legislature. Many compromises had to be made in order for the Constitution to be signed and ratified. One of those compromises had to do with representation in Congress. See, large states wanted representation based on population, which would give them an advantage in Congress. Smaller states didn't like that idea and wanted equal representation among the states, which would give them and their citizens a greater say in legislation. The compromise was a bicameral or two-house legislature, how their members would be chosen, and most important to this discussion, the role of those houses. Now, Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1 of the Constitution reads, All legislative power herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. The very first legally binding line of the Constitution states that all legislative or lawmaking power would be vested in a Congress consisting of a Senate and House of Representatives. To understand the role of these two houses, we need to read the first line of the sections of Article 1 that creates them. Now, Section 2 starts with, "The House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states." Members of the House of Representatives are chosen by the people because their job is to represent the people. Since the population of a country changes over time, the framers of the Constitution allowed for those changes by requiring an enumeration every 10 years so the representatives could be apportioned properly. More on that later. Section 3 of Article 1 starts, "The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, chosen by the legislature thereof, for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote." Now, on the other hand, the Senate was to be made up of an equal number from each state. Although the method of choosing electors was changed by the 17th Amendment, the role of the Senate is obvious from the original method of doing so, by the legislature of the state they were to represent. So the framers of the Constitution gave us this bicameral legislature, with one house chosen by the people and the other chosen by the states. One house was to represent the people, the other house, the states. Now, to accommodate changes in population that would inevitably happen, we enumerate the people every 10 years so we can apportion the representatives properly. Now, back to the apportionment. See, today we focus on how the 435 seats in the House are divided up among the states, which is the definition of apportionment. However, the Constitution does not set a fixed limit on the number of representatives. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 states, "The number of representatives shall not exceed 1 for every 30,000, but each state shall have at least 1 representative." The 2020 census recorded a population in America of 331,449,281 residents. And with a little simple math, that means the House of Representatives should have at least 11,049 members. So why doesn't the House have 11,000 members? Because of a law Congress passed early in the 20th century. In 1911, Congress passed a routine apportionment act based on the 1910 census, setting the size of the House of Representatives to 433 members, up from 391, plus allowing 2 more members when the states of Arizona and New Mexico were added to the Union. During the debate on this legislation, concerns were raised that the House was growing too large, making it unwieldy and difficult to manage. Then in 1920, for the first time, Congress failed to apportion members in the House after a census. This led to the Permanent Apportionment Act of 1929, or at least I think it did. When I searched for the Permanent Apportionment Act, I was directed to Title II U.S.C. Section 2, but when I checked the statute, the text was omitted. There was only a note pointing to the 1911 law that set the size of the House at 435 members. So why all of this concern over an almost 100-year-old piece of legislation of which I cannot even find the actual language? After all, if Congress cannot seem to get much done with only 435 members in the House, imagine if there were 11,000. Of course, there are plenty of people, myself included, who think life would be much better if Congress didn't do nearly as much as it does, especially since most of what they do is illegal. To quote the chairman of the House Committee on the Census in 1911, "Members are supposed to reflect the opinion and stand for the wishes of their constituents. If we make the ratio of persons per representative too large, the idea of representation becomes attenuated and less definite. The personal interest of the voter in his representative becomes less important to him, and we may lose something of the vital strength of our representative form of government." While limiting the number of members in the House may make it easier for them to get things done, it also makes it harder for them to fulfill their constitutional duty of representing the people of their district. When was the last time you tried to communicate with your House member? If you email or write a letter to your member, you'll probably get a form letter in reply. If you call their office, you'll get a staffer. And unless you have some serious pull, it's unlikely you'll get a face-to-face meeting, will you? Why? Well, there are probably plenty of reasons for this. One of them is undoubtedly how busy your representative is. With over 331 million Americans and only 435 members in the House, means each member represents over 750,000 people. It also means that if they spent only 5 minutes with each of their constituents 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it would take over 7 years to meet them all. There just aren't enough hours in the day for your representative to actually know your opinion on a particular subject, not to mention your chance to petition them for a redress of grievance. Now, if your House member only represented 30,000 people, you might still have a hard time getting a meeting, but at least time would not be so much of an issue. They could spend 5 minutes with almost every person in their district every year, working only 9 to 5, 5 days a week. There was an attempt to limit the expansion of the House of Representatives in 1789. The first of the amendments Congress proposed to the states was never ratified. After the first enumeration required by the first article of the Constitution, there should be one representative for every 30,000 until the number shall amount to 100, after which the proportion shall be so regulated by Congress that there shall be not less than 100 representatives, nor less than one representative for every 40,000 persons, until the number of representatives shall amount to 200. After which, the proportion shall so be regulated by Congress that there shall be not less than 200 representatives, nor more than one representative for every 50,000 persons. It seems that by 1929, Congress couldn't be bothered with actually getting the consent of the governed. They thought that the House was large enough, so they simply passed a law. And that brings us back to the foundation we laid at the beginning of this video. The Constitution says we are to have one member of the House for every 30,000 people, and that has never been amended. Yes, Congress has apparently passed legislation limiting the size of the House to 435 members. Now, since that legislation is not pursuant to the Constitution, it is therefore repugnant to, and, according to the Supreme Court, that law is void. Remember the Marbury versus Madison opinion? Thus, the particular phraseology of the Constitution of the United States confirms and strengthens the principle, supposed to be essential to all written constitutions, that a law repugnant to the Constitution is void, and that courts, as well as other departments, are bound by that instrument. If the law limiting the size of the House is void, doesn't that mean we should have over 11,000 members to represent us? So why don't we? In short, it's much like the people in the story of the Emperor's Clothes. The American people are either afraid of or ignorant of the facts and are therefore unwilling to point out the obvious. I haven't even found any evidence that this Permanent Apportionment Act of 1929 was even challenged in court, much less among the states. This lie has been going on for so long, most Americans have been gaslighted into believing it's true. This is one more example of the government in Washington, D.C. being out of control. At this point, I have no confidence that if the Permanent Apportionment Act were to be challenged in federal court, those in the judiciary would even recognize how repugnant it is. Now, should the House of Representatives have over 11,000 members? I'm not sure. What I do know is that it's not up to Congress to determine the size of the House. It is up to we, the people, through our states. Yet we were never consulted, neither have we consented to this change. It seems almost everyone from those elected to federal offices to the average everyday American has come to believe that whatever Congress does is not only legal, but the supreme law of the land. So I guess I must accept the role of the small boy, pointing out that when it comes to the acts of Congress, those emperors have no clothes. Sometimes people ask me why I spend so much time reading and studying the Constitution, and it's stuff like this. It's that inoculation in the brain, that recognition of what is true that highlights what is false. We inoculate our bodies so that it recognizes a disease and is already prepared to fight it. Well, I do the same thing by reading and studying the Constitution. So when someone tells me, oh yeah, Congress passed a law setting its limit to 435, I recognize that's not a power that we've delegated to the United States. It's actually a criminal act for anybody in the United States to limit the size of the House of Representatives. Only the people through our states have that legal authority. Now, I'm not surprised. As I said, most of what happens in Washington, D.C. is criminal. Why would I surprise with one more? But I bring this to you not so much to say that we need to stand up and change the representation in Congress. I think we do, but that's not the point. The point is, I want you to recognize the importance of reading and studying your Constitution, of recognizing the truth of the supreme law of the land, so that you can see the error of what happens in Washington and our state houses. It's that inoculation, it's that preparation of the mind, the recognition of what is true that points out what is false. Now, there are several ways that you can do this, and there are several ways that I can help. Now, first, please head to constitutionstudy.com and check out these articles, the videos, the podcast. It's all there for your education and for you to share. Now, if you have a question, by all means, click the Ask a Question button. I'll be more than happy to answer it. Better yet, join the Constitution Study Live Q&A. Second and fourth Thursday of the month, 7 p.m. Central Time. I hold a live Q&A. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter. Soon, hopefully, you'll find me on Rumble. You can also watch it on the website. Better yet, if you register for the live Q&A, you'll get a link to join the Zoom call. Why is that important? Well, if you're on let's say you're on YouTube or Twitter and you have a question, you type it into the chat. I see the chat, but one, I have several different chat windows open, which makes it a little difficult, but it's hard to have a conversation. You ask a question, and in the process of me answering that question, other people are putting in chats, and it ends up with a bit of a disjointed conversation. On the other hand, if you join the Zoom call, we can have a conversation, Zoom camera to Zoom camera. We can interact. I can make comments. You can ask questions. We can have a give and take and let everyone learn from our interaction. So please give that a try. I hope you'll do it. We have a lot of fun on those, at least I do. I have a lot of fun on those Thursday nights with all these questions and answers and just getting to know other constitutional scholars. Speaking of scholars, a scholar is not an expert. Merriam-Webster defines a scholar as a student. So do you want to be a student of the Constitution? Just like me, I'm a student of the Constitution. Well, head to constitutionalscholars.com. That's constitutionalscholars.com. Join. It's absolutely free to register, and you get access to some of my books, videos, classes. I've got some more classes I'm working on. Yes, you can go to the store and buy books and other material. I'm working on a neat face mask for those of us who are so adverse to face masks. We want to advertise how bad they are. But the biggest thing is you can find other scholars. It's a community. There are groups for all of the different states. There's groups for the United States, and I'm setting up groups for other purposes as well, where we can get together. We can read and study and share and ask questions and provide feedback and really engage with the Constitution. Now, you can also get mentored. I have a mentoring program there. You start out as an apprentice, a learner. It's $5 a month. I'll give you the first month free. You get access to more books, more videos, more classes, and I will find a mentor for you. I will find somebody who you can go to ask questions, a kind of a one-on-one situation. That's what you'll get for the apprentice. You'll also get invited to certain mentor-only events and other processes. But the biggest thing is more education and a mentor to help you grow. So check that out. Again, it's absolutely free to join. You don't have to pay in order to get access to the site. You only pay if you want to have someone mentor you. That's constitutionalscholars.com. Now, I'm also on the radio. I'm on America Out Loud 5 days a week. So head to americaoutloud.com, go to the shows, look for the Constitution Study. You'll find me and you'll see all my recordings. If you can't listen live, they show up on the show page usually 2 or 3 days after they've broadcast. And if you want to ask a question there, again, go to constitutionstudy.com, click Ask a Question. Just note that you'd like me to respond on the radio, and I'll be more than happy to. All of this is so we can help educate ourselves. That's what I do, is I help you learn. My job isn't simply to teach you, it's to help you learn for yourself so that you can continue learning even if I'm not here anymore. All of that is there for you, so please check it out. If you want to support the work that I'm doing, I'd appreciate that greatly. I don't charge for a lot of what I do. Yeah, I charge for the books and I charge for the mentoring, but most of my speaking engagements, these videos, nothing is behind a paywall. So if you can support the work that we're doing, we can donate there at the Constitution Study, and I would appreciate it greatly. But most of all, just take this information and share. Study it, learn it, share it. That's the big ask I have for you. Help me share this. Help me get this in front of more and more people, because the more people that are aware of the truth and recognize the lie will help us restore the rights and liberties that we've lost in this country. So please do that for me. And then if you wouldn't mind, come back here the next time for the Constitution study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from